Alright, so what we're doing today is we're going to attempt to get my secondary fuel tank installed in the Big Dodge. So we've got an adapter kit by Southern Truck. That's the number. Comes with the couplings, little shutoff valve, and the adapter that I guess is supposed to shut off fuel flow. Do a little instructions. And we got the instructions that came with the tank from RDS, and I'll get the number for that in a bit. What I found interesting is they actually recommend using springs underneath so that you're not cranking the tank down hard to the bed, which I kind of like because it's aluminum and it'll crack eventually if you hard mount it. We're also going to have some foam that we'll put under it, and then the line itself. But so far it looks pretty interesting. Took a few shots to get the right tank because I ordered it from Amazon the first time and they didn't send the right one, which didn't fit under my tonneau cover. And so I ordered it straight from RDS the second time, and now we have it right. So I think the first thing I'm going to do is try to get this installed. And that'll guarantee that I can get the rest of it done. Not sure. I might pull that out and just put some thread sealant on it because it doesn't look like there is any from the factory. And I like having at least a little goo to act like a seal. But she is snug. It's not like it's finger tight, so they did crank it down, but I think I'm going to pull it out and put a little bit of sealant on it before we start. But there we go. Alright, so it appears I have the right size, because that'll fit, and then this valve will have to go up, obviously. I got a couple of choices. First, I could put it all the way over here and use the factory coupler to the top of the tank, and then I have to cut out to about here, and then, but you've got this bonding strap here that gets screwed to the fender, or screwed to the frame. Coupler may not have 100% engagement on that, but I think that might be option one. The other option is to put it kind of in here, obviously upside down. Then I'd have to use both couplers and go somewhere in there like that. But this is a metal line, so that has to get cut regardless. It's not like I can just slap it in between a couple of plastic couplers. So got some other interesting things here. This is these lines here that go up there on the smaller lines, that's DEF, and they have what appear to be kind of fuel fitting-y, Ford fuel fitting-y things. I think those green tabs pull out, and then those just pull to disconnect, so that would be fairly quick to disconnect. These just have screw clamp fittings, nothing terrible major there, and obviously that wire would have to be disconnected. And then there's a hose, I'm not sure exactly what that goes to, but that thing that's tie wrapped around the bottom of the fuel filler, that would have to be disconnected. What I think I'm going to try to do is actually pull this whole neck assembly out. It appears that the plastic shroud up there is attached to the outside of the fender by 3 Torx screws. You can maybe be able to see one of them there at the bottom. And some foam. Surprise. That whole growth sticks out there so it goes around the door hinge. But I think if I can pull this whole assembly out, the DEF tank's pretty low, so that shouldn't be an issue. Diesel tank's kind of full, so that may be an issue. We'll see how much I spill. If this thing starts leaking, I may have to go drain some of it. But the otherwise, that's I think what we're going to do is going to get this thing out of there, because the last thing I want to do is cut this in place and then end up with shavings in the tank. So I'm going to try to pull this whole hose assembly out, see how much of a pain that is, and go from there. Okay, these are actually even simpler than Ford connectors. You just actually have to squeeze these two tabs and she pops off. That is pretty wild. Let's see if we can do it here. You kind of need two hands because they're not, the rest of the stuff isn't mounted terribly hard, but it is. It looks the same on the top as it does on the bottom, and those appear to be squeeze tabs that you squeeze and then it pops apart. So that's pretty easy. I like that. We're going to get that next one off. So that's exactly how those come apart. You got to squeeze those tabs on the top and the bottom of them, and then they just kind of pull off. So that's pretty slick. Well, the DEF is disconnected now. Now I'm going to work on the two screw clamps that are over there on the fuel lines. Pop that little vacuum hose off of whatever that growth is held on by the tie wrap, and then we're going to try to get it out the top. So rock and roll. Alright, so of course the screws for the clamps are different sizes. The main fill hose is a 5/16, and the little one for the vent is 7mm, or at least that's what fit really well. So, and they're both loose. Now I got to get whatever the heck it is. Looks like maybe a 10 for that bonding strap. Crack that loose, and then try to pry up a little bit on the hoses, just loosen them up a little bit, and then we're going to try to see what it takes to get this thing out of here. Yep, it is a 10. It's just a nut on a stud. And then the vent hose comes off pretty easy because it doesn't have much engagement, but the fill hose has quite a bit, so that one could take a little bit of finagling once we loosen up the top. So now we're going to pop out the bolts on the outside and see where we go. Again, we've got 3 Torx screws. Not much there. Seems to be all that's holding that in, so we're going to go find the right bit, zip those off, and see what happens. Alright, so they seem to be T25s, so we're going to pop those off. This is actually an aftermarket piece that I got from Amazon, because these don't come with fuel caps, so that had to come off because it's attached up here. But yeah, once you get that, the whole thing just kind of flops. So now hopefully we'll have enough room under there to pop off that other hose and get this thing out, because I think that's it. And this may be easier than I had hoped to this point. Kind of glad I thought to seal this, because I was able to break that loose holding this in my hand with a wrench. It was not terribly tight. So we're going to put some goo on it, seal her up good, snug her down good, and we should be ready to go. Alright, so I decided to do it on that end rather than in the middle because I didn't want to cut the sticker. Nah, I just figured it's got one fewer hose clamp. It fits pretty good. I think the clamps, I may put 2 clamps on the actual tank end because it's a slightly larger hose than the ones that come with the kit, but I think it's going to work fine. To cut it, I marked it where I needed it, and then I used my old plumbing cutter, which worked pretty good for about 60% of it, and then at least it gave me a kind of a straight line to shoot at with the hacksaw to get it cut the rest of the way. And then I just filed all the burrs down, cleaned out the tube, and I think we're ready to start putting this poor thing back together. So, the interesting part of this is you basically got to get all your hoses, or at least this big hose, hooked on before you put this back. And then once you get that in place, and you probably can put the vent hose, slide it on, you don't necessarily need to attach the DEF hoses until after the fact because they're just plastic and flex a little bit. That other thing that was attached in here, it was just held on with a couple of tie wraps, and I didn't know how that hose came off, and I didn't want to break it, so I just cut the tie wraps, and we will tie wrap it back in place afterwards. No big deal. So we're going to get under there, install the adapter, snug it down a little bit on the fuel tank side, and then try to slip this thing back in. Alright, so she's back in. That went in pretty good. Remember, these just go into plastic, so tighten them till they strip, back out half a turn. That'll do it. And underneath, doesn't look too terrible, but give me a minute, I suppose. So I haven't snugged up the 2 clamps on the filler pipe on the outside yet, but the other one is snug. It's not touching anything. I got to go in and snug up the vent pipe and reattach my bonding strap, and then reattach the def, and then put that thing, tie wrap it back up there. It's just kind of hanging down in the bottom there, right here. And yeah, that hose does not come off of the bottom of that, so you definitely have to cut the tie wraps. That's not something that can just pop apart from what I can tell. So we're going to give those a crank and keep working. So here's our next steps. And I'm debating right now whether I want to cut my bed mat. Since the instructions for installing that tank, model 72771, 60 gallon RDS, show that they recommend insulating it with foam from the bed, I think I'm going to leave the mat in and just drill through it and mount it. If I ever need to take the topper off and use the 5th wheel hitch, I can just cut a hole in it at that point for the 5th wheel, or the gooseneck. So yeah, if I ever actually get a 5th wheel, that's going to be a completely different animal altogether. Now the other thing that I have to carry, or that I do carry in here, is the ramps, so I can get my side-by-side up on top of the bed cover, my Diamondback bed cover, which is really kind of nice because I don't have to take an extra trailer when I'm already towing a trailer. Just drive the side-by-side up on here and call it a day. And she works great. Now, people might be wondering why the hell I'm doing this. Who needs 92 gallons of gas-ish? Or fuel, I should say. This is a diesel, not gas. And I don't, really. But I get paranoid when I'm towing, because even this thing being a diesel, with the 410 gears and the 10,000 pound travel trailer behind it, the 1,500 pound side by side sitting on top of this thing blowing in a breeze, towing at 65, 70 miles an hour on the highway, it doesn't get terribly good fuel economy. I might be getting 8 to 10 max, and it's only got a 32 gallon tank. So if I start out from here and go, one of my rules of thumb is if I'm towing, I don't like to let it get below a half a tank. And because I got almost screwed the first time we ever took the trailer out and we were towing it with the half ton. I left here with a half a tank, and we got 100 miles down the road. I was about dead empty, and I had to gas up at a spot of need rather than a spot of opportunity, and it was not a good design to get that 60-foot long combination in and out. So I learned my lesson. So I never leave unless I am topped up, and I start looking for gas at about a half a tank. And 15 gallons or so out of this thing, maybe 20, only will get you 150 to 180 miles, which is kind of ridiculous for me. Now, if I wanted to run it all the way empty and take my chances, yeah, you get a little bit more than that. But so this is my insurance policy. If I fill this and I fill the tank, I will have more than enough fuel to not worry about having to refuel before I get pretty much anywhere we want to go when it comes to how we travel. So that's the point. I mean, I don't need it. It wasn't cheap. That's about a $600 tank when you factor in shipping. And the other stuff was maybe another $100 worth of crap to get it all installed down there. But it's peace of mind. And the nice thing is it fits under this tonneau cover, and since that front end opens, which I'll show you in a minute after I move it, it's easy to get at and easy to fill and keeps it pretty secure, although the cap does lock if you need it to. So I'm going to start getting some of this stuff out of here, like these ramps, so I have some room to move around, because I got to do a few things to this tank, because I'm not 100% sure if they sealed stuff in the same manner that the people who built that little adapter kit did. So that's next. All right, so unlatch it, lift it up a little bit, and you got to push a secondary lock out of the way, and there she is. we will be able to get to this tank just fine. And it does appear that they did use a sealant on the threads, so that's good. Really, really nice quality. And this cover is heavy. I want to say that's stainless. Nice gasket. Fuel level gauge, faces the wrong direction, but it'll be pretty obvious when I figure it out. Got some feet to drill through and put some stuff underneath, which I don't think is going to be a big deal. This is a vent. I believe it's got a rollover ball in it, which is nice. I'm not sure what that's for, but I don't know. It'll be fine. So I got to get this thing turned around. We're going to undo that one down there and put the little quarter turn valve in, because that'll shut it off, which they recommend when it's not being driven. And I don't blame them. In case the ball gets stuck or whatever, you don't want to dump 60 gallons of diesel into your truck. So, not quite sure what I'm going to do next, but I think I'm going to mount that is what I think I'm going to do. And of course, where the tank needed to go up front here is dead in line with one of the lower cross members. So I used a little hole saw to cut out a little bit, and now we're going to build a little tape together stack, get that up in there, get the spring, get the washers, and get everything started, and then we'll finish by snugging her up and running the pipe. Okay, well, I assumed this is a vent, so I just kind of ran a piece of hose up into the stake pocket, keep the mud daubers from getting to it, the tank itself. Got her locked in place. The only thing, like I had mentioned, that was a little screwy, and it was just because of where I had to put it, because I needed it as far forward as possible in order to clear my ramps, I ended up drilling into right over the top of this frame rail. So I just cut a little hole in it, and that allowed me to get up in there. And actually this side I ended up having to make a stud that was about a ½ inch longer because it wasn't on top of one of the ribs. It was on the bottom, and that just I couldn't get the nuts started. But we got all that schmooed up with some Cosmoline on both sides. The center one was no issue, and she's right there. No problem with that. That actually ended up being perfect. And all of the plumbing is done. Good night. And I got all of the clamps as snug as possible. I kind of wish it came with a grommet. I may end up putting one on there eventually, but for now my electrical tape will do to make sure everything works. So now I'm going to take this pig to the gas station, put some fuel in it, see what we can do. Well, let's get this closed. There we go. Come on. There. Perfect. All right. Let's go put some fuel in her. Let's check for leaks. All right, so not quite a full tank because I had driven it back and forth to work last month when I needed to do an oil change. So we should be able to see if she works on the way back to the house. So, all right, well, off to the store. All right, so we just put hair over 15 gallons in the tank, and it just barely started to move. The needle on the gauge, so I'm not sure. So that basically tells me when it says empty, there's 12-ish gallons left in it. That's interesting. So I got the valve open. I didn't see any immediate leaks. We'll run her back to the house and see if this thing fills up. All right, so everything looks good. I got it on a little bit of an angle, so it's kind of showing almost a quarter tank now, so I'm sure it's above that. What's interesting though is I don't believe that this will fill a tank from empty. What it'll do is it'll maintain your tank at whatever level you start at. Because down under here, if you can see that kind of ball down there, that's a check valve. When I push it, I can feel air coming out. So unless you hold that open, this thing here is going to end up with a balance inside that tank, and it's not going to put any more in it. So I'm just going to hold that open a little bit to get to make sure I've got oil going down to the tank. Let her close. All right, yep, and we're still doing pretty good. So I'm gonna go underneath and take a look, see if we got any leaks. I don't think we do. I don't see anything coming on the ground. No. Everything looks to be dry. So I think we're ready to test this thing on a trip, which is good. So basically, what could happen is that one-way valve up here that kind of holds an airlock in this tank, if that fails and your shutoff valve is open, it'll drain the tank onto the ground. That's the problem you can run into. So, cool. I thought it might have had a float up in this thing, but I don't think it is. I think it's actually because this tank in here is pressurized. And so basically the right thing to do is fill this tank first, then fill the auxiliary tank, which of course is what it says in the book, but why do I want to do what the book says? That wouldn't make too much sense. But I'll do that next time we take it out. I just wanted to get a leak checked, and I think it is at this point. I think we're in good shape. So that's kind of how you install a second tank in your diesel. Can't do this with gas. It's not allowed. They don't make them safe enough for that. But with the lower energy of the diesel, or lower, I guess, combustibility of the diesel rather than the flammability of the gasoline, it's not as bad. So now if I wanted to, I could lock this up, but I can lock this so I don't need to have to worry about it. And anyway, if you saw any tools that you think might be useful, they're available on my Amazon affiliate. I do appreciate y'all for watching and taking the time to comment, like, subscribe, all that other silliness that everybody else says. Must be something to that. Who knows? But anyway, hope you all are having a good day. Talk to you later.